In the east of England, an estuary cuts into the country like a knife into a body. Follow this water and you find yourself upon the River Trent. Once upon a time, Saxon settlers from Europe sailed down here in search of a new life. Some settled in the town I grew up in. This little town has been rumoured to be the country's capital for a day, but I don't know about that. Apparently, some pilgrims that sailed upon the Mayweather to America came from this town, and it isn't a stranger to literary efforts. Our Old Town by Thomas Miller and The Mill upon the Floss by George Eliot are rumoured to be based upon this place. The authors took the effort not to mention its name, so I shall do the same. They paint a romantic picture of this town, but I'm not sure I can do the same. Sure, when the sun is shining in July and beer has been spilt, there's a community spirit drawing the best out of people. But on that day, when the sun goes down and you're walking past the graveyard, you can feel a chill upon your neck, and you can't help but look back and wonder who's lurking. There's a desperation. The people are like everywhere else, except for their lack of hope. And that can make the most respectable of people do the most terrible things. There is a building here much more famous than any other. The Old Hall. A Tudor manor house in the middle of the town, its shining jewel. Apparently Henry VIII stopped here twice. I can imagine him now up and down the corridors, probably drunk. Well, there is a legend that something lurks here in the dead of night. And that's why we're here today, to find out if she's there. So come along, if you dare. Our story begins on Halloween in a classroom of Year 8s. Big windows spilled in darkening, the clocks turned back light. Winter coats and scarves hung on chairs, and children nattered to those beside them. Mrs. Sunny, the RE teacher, had set a task 20 minutes ago, but the children weren't participating. It was the last lesson of the day, and she didn't mind. Her back hurt. It always did. She'd been clinically obese since the age of 18, and in 3 months upon her birthday, she would die of a heart attack at her mother's house. But today, she was blissfully unaware of that. One table was louder than the rest. 5 boys occupied it, and on the floor near them was a tattered old football. They were what Americans call jocks, continuously playing sport and ridiculing anyone who walked by, or what the British call dickheads. There was a battle going on between Joe Stones and Kyle Baines, a slagging battle. They threw insults at each other as the rest kept score. First to 10 won. The rules were simple. Bring up a previous embarrassment, resurface it, while calling them something at the same time. That usually scored. Rumours worked well too. "So, is your dad still shagging your dog?" said Kyle to Joe. "Ha ha ha! All 9-8, said Tom Fisher. "So what you got left, Joe?" said Marcus Anderson. "Well, I was going to mention Tara Dawson, but I don't want Kyle to cry again." "Oh my God, I can't believe he's gone there," said Marcus. Kyle had been dating, gone out, seeing, whatever you call snogging behind the bike sheds with Tara Dawson before she moved to Scotland in the summer. Whilst getting ready to leave, her and Kyle was hugging outside her house. Kyle had been crying. Unfortunately for him, at that moment, Tom Fisher was driving past with his mum, going food shopping, and he saw the whole blubbery thing. Of course he told everyone, except Kyle. Kyle kept a straight face, watching his friends' smiles, then looked away. How did they know? What are you talking about?" said Kyle, raising an eyebrow. Mr. Ludwig, the drama teacher, would have been proud. "Come on, Kyle, we all know," said Nick Hampton. At that point, Joe leant forward with a knuckle to his eye and made his lips quiver. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. Marcus, Nick and Tom roared with laughter, banging their fists on the table. "Oi, keep it down over there. Get back to your poster," said Mrs. Sunny, annoyed they forced her out of her slumber. But they barely listened. 10-8 to Joe. "That was brilliant," said Marcus. Carl was agitated, perplexed by the Tara Dawson thing. He wanted to ask, to put back his image, but the secret was out. Someone had seen him, his arms around his girlfriend, the tears, the heartbreak. Carl was only 12 years old, but Tara leaving had been hard. School was hard too, not the subjects, but the image he had to maintain. It was with Tara he could be himself, holding her hand on walks around the block, eating ice cream, even a couple of sleepovers, in separate rooms of course. But Kyle didn't care, he just loved being around Tara. It had been the only time he actually felt relaxed. Now he felt a million miles from her. Not the 259 it actually was. He didn't hate his friends, but they were tiring. He had taken a setback today. He had to redeem himself. He looked around the class for a target. He didn't understand what he was doing. Like most kids, he just did things. He didn't know his brain was evolved to keep him high in the social hierarchy. that his brain interpreted the slagging loss as dangerous, and evolution designed him to seek ever closer union with his pack, because that meant survival when food was scarce thousands of years ago. No, he just needs to make them laugh, and quick. He picked up the dirty tattered football, and his friends gave him a strange look. "What are you doing?" asked Tom Fisher. Carl turned in his seat. On the next table he saw Rory Plumtree, an obvious target, a quiet lad who never bothered a soul. He was tall and walked with a peculiar way, bouncing as he went with a permanent smile. There was something different about him. He possessed the qualities of an old man in a 12-year-old's body, the kind of guy that smiled at a flower in spring. Carl threw the football hard at Rory's head. It hit him in the eye, making him spill runny glue on his trousers. The class erupted into laughter. Carl turned back, pretending he knew nothing about it, which revealed him as the obvious culprit. But lucky for him, Mrs. Sunny didn't have that tactility of thought. "Which one was it?" shouted Mrs. Sunny at the lads. "Come on, man up, who was it?" said Mrs. Sunny. Rory's fingertips quivered on his face. He wasn't crying, his eyes were watering from the sting, but that didn't stop Samantha Atkinson adding to the embarrassment. "Oh my God, he's crying," she said, pointing. There was more laughter. "So none of you are going to admit it. Sums you lot up, doesn't it? Just cowards," said Mrs. Sunny. Carl kept a cool face, his back to Rory. He thought that gave him the advantage, until Rory opened his mouth. "You really are a wanker, aren't you?" said Rory. Everyone went quiet. Even Mrs. Sunny was shocked into silence. It wasn't the words, it was who said them. No one had ever seen Rory mad, and he was close to that now. "I know it was you, Carl, you fucking moron," said Rory. This brought a chorus of oohs from the students. Carl couldn't believe it. As 28 pairs of eyes descended on him, again he was losing reputation. Letting someone like Rory get away with it was social suicide. Carl waited, hoping Mrs. Sunny would tell Rory off for swearing, but she didn't. He was alone. "What are you talking about, you weirdo?" said Kyle. "Don't lie, I saw you," said Rory. "I literally don't know what you're talking about," said Kyle. "Does anything but shit come out of your mouth?" said Rory. The class laughed, and Nick even got in a "Don't cry, Kyle." "Enough of the swearing, Rory," said Mrs. Sunny, almost captivated to the students. "You're an idiot. You're just," Rory continued, stopping himself from swearing. "You can't talk. You're a freak. You always have been. Look at the state of you. Had any visits from the Grey Lady recently?" said Kyle. There was another chorus of oohs. "Right, that's enough," said Mrs. Sunny. "Kyle, get your things and get out and go see Mr. Taylor." As Kyle stood up and put on his coat, there was a loud bang. 28 heads turned in its direction. Rory's head was on the table. A broken pencil lay beside him. He was completely still, and his eyes were wide open. Then blood began to pour out his nose. Rory had stuck a pencil up his nose and slammed his head hard against the table, forcing the sharp lead into his skull. Samantha Atkinson pointed again, but this time she screamed. The screams got louder and louder as more blood poured from Rory's nose. School had finished for the day. Joe Stone stood on the bridge of Middlefield Lane and looked out. In the distance the sun was setting. There was something he loved about this view. He looked down the motorway and in the distance could see Trent Bridge. Beyond that was the golden fields of Nottinghamshire. He could see for miles and miles. He tried to ignore his friends around him. He needed the tranquility after what he witnessed today. They were waiting for Kyle. They watched him approach with an amber report card in his hand. A green card was the least severe, amber for continuing naughtiness, and red for near expulsion. Kyle's words had potentially killed someone. Joe wondered what would warrant a red card. The friends stood in a circle. There was an unheard silence between them. They all asked themselves the same questions in their heads. Do I bring it up? As the silence grew unbearable, Marcus broke it. "So what did Taylor say?" "He said..." Kyle's head went down, and he closed his eyes. "He said it wasn't my fault." The group looked at one another. The image of Rory's head and glassy eyes crashed into their minds, one they would never forget. "Is he..." said Kyle, stopping to swallow uncomfortably. "Is he..." He wanted to ask if Rory was alive, but he couldn't. The idea of him being dead was too unbearable. "I didn't want him to do anything like that," said Kyle, looking at the cold ground. He could feel tears. With all his might he tried to stop them, but they slipped from his eye. "Kyle, are you..." "Again?" said Tom Fisher. "Leave me alone, Tom," said Kyle, his voice breaking. Seriously, mate, it's okay. We're not going to take the mick, said Tom. Kyle wanted to cry, to really let it out, but it was an absolute no. All he could think about was Rory and how weak his friends must think he was. Sorry, but I have to say it. That was so messed up, said Joe. Lads, I don't think he's... said Marcus, taking off his glasses and looking at the grey sky. Kyle covered his face. Droplets of light rain fell as tears streamed down his face. The rest looked at each other and pulled awkward faces. Let's not overthink. Let's try to put it out of our minds. It was a freak accident. Well, not an accident, but Rory was never right in the head. It's Halloween. Where are we meeting up tonight? We're still meeting up, right? Said Joe, trying his very best to move things on. Course we are. It shouldn't stop us, should it? Said Marcus. They looked at one another, worse for wear, but they all agreed it shouldn't. Kyle, you're coming, right? Said Joe, wanting to put his arm around his friend, but he worried someone might call him gay, so he didn't. Kyle sniffed hard and wiped his runny nose. He felt full of shame and weakly said, Yeah, I'm coming. Brilliant, said Marcus. Still meeting at the water tower on top of Hickman Hill, said Joe. That's fair. Everyone's still getting dressed up, right? Said Marcus. Yeah, don't worry. I've got a costume sorted, said Nick with a hidden smile. Brilliant. I'm up for it, said Marcus. They all looked at Kyle. Don't worry, I'll be there, he said, unable to hide the pain in his eyes. The five stood below the water tower under the night sky. Over their shoulders was the town's graveyard. They looked downhill at the bottom road that went beneath the old railway line. Beyond that was the lights of the centre of town. Above them only the brightest stars twinkled. Only on this night could they have gotten away with being dressed of how they were without getting beat up. Joe Stone said he was a bat. Black face paint and fake wings that moved on a string attached to his wrists just about supported his claim. Marcus Anderson declared he was the Hulk. Green body paint with a ripped white vest and three-quarter jeans supported his claim. Tom said he was a vampire. White face paint with red at the corner of his mouth to symbolise blood and slicked back hair did its job. But Nick had gone the extra mile. He knew it would get a giggle, and they needed it after today. Without doubt, he was Catwoman. Tight black, shiny spandex verified his claim. His older sister had suggested it when she couldn't fit into it. At first it was a joke, but after the persuasion he tried it on. He thought he looked so hilarious he had to show them. When he turned up, Joe actually fell to his knees laughing, and he got a small applause for his bravery, because it wasn't a warm night. Kyle had come as the Joker. His hair was spray-painted green, and there was a red painted-on smile and a purple jacket that looked like the authentic thing. Nobody knew where he got it from. But he looked the saddest of Jokers. With his head down and his shoulders slumped, it was obvious what was on his mind. They walked down Hickman Hill, through Silver Street into the centre of town, and received laughs and jeers from drinking and smoking men outside the pubs. They walked down terrace streets, knocking on doors and saying, "Trick or treat." People were generous, because they could see they had made the effort. They passed other kids and the occasional parent, but surprisingly nobody from their class. Tom had brought eggs in case someone was being tight, but spirits were high and he didn't get the chance to use them. It was a good harvest. They even got some electric toothbrushes from one gentleman who claimed he worked for the company that made them. When all was done, they sat at the steps of the library, under a bright moon eating sweets. Opposite them was the Tudor manor house, the old hall. Even in the dark, its white walls could be seen clearly. They sat in silence, and it felt like it was watching them. The streets were strangely silent. As 9 p.m. approached. "You think she's in there?" Everyone looked to see who had said it. It was Kyle sat furthest away. The red-painted smile could be seen on his cheek. His eyes glistened in a fascinating way. "Don't," said Marcus. "I think she is." "Why else would Rory do what he did?" said Kyle. Nobody spoke. They didn't know what to say. Then they heard something quite distinct. The sound of a crowd of people having fun. It had creeped up on them, like someone had turned up a circular knob on a radio slowly. There was many voices, like the sound of a busy pub as you walked past on the other side of the street. Then a bright light. It came from an open door of the old hall. The light shone down the pathway, all the way to the library steps. From that open door came the sound of people drinking, eating and laughing. It was clear now, and the lads watched in wonder. Then Kyle stood up. "What are you doing?" said Joe. "What do you think?" said Kyle, crossing the road. He walked through the doorway like a moth to the flame. "You can't just walk in," said Tom. "You can, too late," said Nick, as they watched Kyle disappear inside. One by one they entered the grand hall. They discovered no light, except for the silver shine of moon coming in from the large windows on either side. Around the hall was a table covered in goblets, plates, knives and forks. All scattered around there was old wooden chairs, and a couple had been knocked over. It looked like there had been a party, maybe for a king, because at the end of the hall was a big chair, like a throne, with an emblem carved into the wood. Hanging from the windows was a huge flags that reminded Kyle of the houses from Harry Potter, Gryffindor and Slytherin and all that. And there was a warm ambience, like people had just been there. "Where did they go?" said Tom. "Who?" said Nick, touching a metal goblet that was surprisingly cold. The people. You heard them, right?" said Tom. "Of course we did. It sounded like there was hundreds of them," said Joe. Kyle was now standing in the centre of the hall. Moonlight shone upon his hair but revealed no green. He turned to his friends and they saw him smiling. With the red painted on smile, it looked all too extreme, like it was pushing the limits of sanity. "It's her," said Kyle. His voice was full of air and sounded like a hiss. "Who?" said Nick. "Don't give me that, you know who!" shouted Kyle. His voice echoed down the many corridors. They stood in silence. Marcus, Tom and Joe and Nick felt butterflies in their stomachs as they looked at Kyle. His body language had changed. His head was high, his shoulders were back, and that not right smile persisted. They weren't sure if it was the hall or him which was putting them at unease. "We have to find her," said Kyle. "No way. We should go. It's getting late. I'll get in trouble if I don't get back home soon," said Tom. "But you don't understand," said Kyle, looking deeply into the checkered floor. "What?" said Joe. Kyle closed his eyes and took a deep breath. "If we find her, I know Rory's death isn't my fault." "What? He might not even be dead," said Nick. "Don't lie. You saw the blood," said Kyle. Silence hung over them. Kyle turned to face them, and the moonlight fell from his face, making him seem darker. "If we find her, I know Rory died because of the torment she gave him, not me. Do you understand?" said Kyle. They all looked at one another. One by one they stepped up and made a circle. "We'll help you, mate," said Marcus. "Okay, a quick look around then," said Tom. "Shall we split into pairs?" said Nick. "There's 5 of us," said Marcus. "That's okay. I'll go alone," said Kyle. "Why?" said Nick. "Because we can't be too long. 3 teams should cover this place quite quickly. Anyway, what's to worry about? She's not real, right?" said Kyle, smirking in a way that none of them liked. "You sure?" said Marcus. "Yeah," said Kyle. "Fair enough. Joe, me and you, Tom, Nick, you take that way, we'll go this way," said Marcus, pointing towards the darkened corners of the room. "Okay, I'm going upstairs," said Kyle. "Right, let's not be too long. Meet back here in half an hour, because I'm not going to lie, this place is giving me the creeps," said Joe. As the lads walked off, they all looked back at Kyle, who walked up the spiral staircase alone, and all thought, "He's braver than I am." The 4 lads looked down corridors, peering into rooms with squinty eyes. They passed Tudor paintings that reminded them of the famous one of Queen Elizabeth with her hand upon the globe they had seen in history class. They were hesitant to enter the darkest corners. It always felt like something was behind them, watching their every move. But everywhere they turned, there was nothing but silence. After 20 minutes, Kyle, Marcus, Tom and Nick were back in the main chamber hall looking at one another. "He's taking his time. Should one of us go up there?" said Joe. They all looked towards the narrow passage leading to the spiral staircase. Somehow it repelled them, like some invisible omen was waiting. "We should wait. If one of us went up and couldn't find him, then that'd be 2 of us lost," said Marcus, hoping he didn't sound too scared. "Yeah, let's just wait here. I'm sure he'll be down here any second," said Tom, as they all looked towards the stairs again. Kyle had covered most of the upstairs, peering down corridors and walking into rooms, seeing nothing but old paintings and wardrobes. As he prepared to head back down the stairs, he heard something strange. He stopped. Was that the night? Perhaps the wind upon a window? He stood still, not breathing, focusing on what might be, and he heard it again. It was in front of him. He couldn't describe it exactly, except to say it was someone. That sent a shiver down his spine and tingle up his skull. Again he listened. Maybe it was just the wind, he wondered. No, there it was again, in the room ahead. Was that a yawn? In disbelief, he told himself his man must be playing tricks. But then he realised that that was a trick, because his mind wanted to leave. He'd heard someone, so he stepped closer. He could hear someone inside a room down the corridor. There was a shuffling noise. Then his foot creaked upon the floorboard. "Father, is that you?" came a woman's voice. Kyle's stomach sank. It made no sense. But her voice, it was so soft and clean, young and pleasing somehow. Then she spoke again. "Frank, is that you, my love? Have you returned, my dear sweet?" Kyle peered into the room. It was small and circular, and in the low light he could make out a bed. Someone was under the sheets. "Please do not keep me waiting. I feel I have been waiting an eternity. Break your silence and mend this broken heart," said the woman. "Hello?" said Kyle, casting his words like a lonely fisherman. "Who goes there? I know not of thee." "I'm Kyle." "Kyle? I know no Kyle. What a peculiar name. What reason do you have, Kyle, to be in my room? You do not sound like my chambermaid to me." "No, I creep into the rooms of young women often, does thee?" "No." "Then what business do you have?" I'm looking for the Grey Lady." "The bloody what? The Grey Lady? I know of the Lady White of Hertfordshire, but that is not what you ask. I'm sorry, there is no Lady Grey here. I am Lady Burke, and I advise you that you leave this instant with the utmost haste. My father does not approve of men in my presence, to say the least." Kyle was frozen. He didn't know what was happening, whether he was dreaming or not. He turned to walk away, and the floorboard creaked an ugly cry. "Wait," said the woman suddenly. "Come back. See, I get so lonely." Kyle stopped. He turned back hesitantly towards the room. He breathed deeply, and curiosity got the best of him. He stepped into the room. His eyes focused and watched the bedsheets ruffle as she turned beneath them. Kyle could see now her eyes as she held the cover over her face. He could see her black hair and skin on the forehead around her eyes. It looked dry and broken, like the bark of a dying tree. "But you are just a boy," she said. "What does a woman need from a boy like you?" I don't know." "But a man you shall become. Tell me, do you think I'm pretty?" Kyle could see she was about to move the bedsheet and reveal her whole face. He didn't want to see her. He knew it would upset him, maybe make him cry, so he looked down. "Look at me," said the woman. "Sorry, I don't want to." "Look at me." Her voice had changed, deeper now. Tears rolled down Kyle's cheeks for the third time that day. I can't."
"Look at me."
The voice was inhuman, deafening and demonic, and pure panic made Kyle look up. He saw it for a second. He covered his eyes with trembling hands as he went to be sick.
"Frank could never love me now. I hope he never sails back down the Trent, but I still want to be loved."
Kyle heard footsteps coming quickly right at him. His hands moved. The last thing he saw was teeth and black eyes. When the boys downstairs heard the screams, they ran. They was only met by a sweet silence as they left Silver Street. 2 weeks later, something was spotted upon the Trent Bridge at 7 a.m. It was naked, sat on the steel side looking at the water below. Dog walkers called the police. Those who saw it said it didn't have a face. It had eye holes but no teeth, nostrils but no nose, and a mouth but no teeth or tongue. From the description in the police report, many went on to say it was Kyle Baines, the boy who disappeared on Halloween. Nobody ever believed Marcus, Joe, Tom and Nick's story of how they lost him in the old hall, not after what had happened to Rory on the same day. Everyone said they were cruel for making up such lies. The strange boy-like creature jumped into the river, and its body was never found.